I really like the analogy, or I don't know, maybe it's more than an analogy, that economics is kind of the geometry of markets in a way.
Yep.
Because this
Well,
this to
that's
me,
what our claim is.
yes, well, and I think it's enshrined in the Austrian literature actually. So you look at, we'd say Keynesian economics has more of the physics type envy you've described, but Austrian economics is very demathematized. It's really like Euclidean geometry or any other form of geometry. It's just rooted in these axioms that we then rationally deduce. I guess they are theorems from, but it's based in an a priori rationalistic epistemology, whereas all of these other, Keynesian economics is much more empirical, I guess you could say. I would call that more economic history versus first principle economics, which is how I view.
It's an interesting question because you see, one of the problems with Keynesianism is that it's like trying to describe a physical system when in fact your interference with that physical system may be the most important determiner of how that physical system behaves. So if somebody says, okay, I've got this distribution of temperatures at time 0, and then I allow it to run, what will my distribution of temperatures be at time 7, let's say?
Yeah.
And then I say, well, I could try to solve that problem using the heat equation, but tell me something. Are you going to be pumping heat in over here and sucking it out over there and shaking the box and sticking your hand in? And the person says, yeah, I mean, somebody's got to manage the economy. And then I say, well, then I don't want to guess what it's going to do, because my guess is that you're going to interfere with everything that my calculations would say. And if I don't have a model for you, Mr. Central Banker, I don't know how it's supposed to evolve, because you could step in at any moment and say, we're closing the gold window and opening the latex window, where you can exchange money for rubber to stretch your dollar further, something like this. Okay, I don't know what stupid thing's going to occur to you. I can't be responsible for trying to guess my future because you've got your finger on the scale. Your thumb is pushing down on the scales that I use to measure and evaluate what it is I'm doing with my life. So I'm sympathetic with what Keynesianism wants to do in theory, which is to alleviate things like the economy seizing up because everybody prefers to hold savings due to nervousness. Mm-hmm. Okay. But what you're also doing is that you're giving certain people the right to play God, and I don't think they have the wisdom to do
it. Agreed completely on that. So, and this is something that quantum physics...
I want to say something more, though.
Please.
It's not intrinsically that I think everybody is, corrupt or stupid, but my experience with this has been very interesting. In essence, I understand that the field doesn't want to acknowledge that it doesn't know what it's doing, but it doesn't.
Right.
And it's not like they're saying, historically, this is really an important claim. Let's see if there's anything to it. Mm-hmm. It's more like, how do we make this go away? Mm-hmm. And the usual way to make things go away is that you start attacking the people. What are their motivations? Why are they doing this? Why do they think it's a big deal? Well, we should be able to agree that if the field is not interested in itself as a science, it doesn't want to scientifically progress. It's not interested in new techniques or whether or not the claims that it's made are provably false. Then you wouldn't want those people at the Keynesian tiller, even if you believed in Keynesianism. You'd say, why would I want the least competent people who are the most head in the sand, the people who want to stay in Plato's cave and never see the sunlight? Why would I want them with their hands on the tiller of the economy? Why would I want their thumb on my scale in the marketplace of ideas? Mm-hmm. So in part, what I've become just incensed about is, how dare you hide your field away from challengers? You can pretend to have a Nobel Prize, which you don't. But why don't you line up all the Nobel Prize winners who want to go down and fight this thing off?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it's an excellent point. And the general insulation from competition, both ideologically and economically, is the problem with the monetary system, right? It's a legal monopoly. Therefore, distorted prices, no innovation, corruption, et cetera. So I want to get back to this.
Please.
I think this is an excellent point, because in my mind, this is derived from quantum physics, Heisenberg uncertainty principle.
Actually, if you don't mind,
please.
Gauge theory is not derived from quantum. I just want to very quick.
I'm sorry, not making that claim in particular. Okay. I'm just drawing a connection here that where you describe trying to isolate an economic experiment, but you can't because there's some hand coming in. You don't have a model.
Oh, okay.
The individual.
I see. You want to make a sort of an interference. Physicists tend to be a little touchy about using the uncertainty principle and Schrodinger's cat and all that as by way of analogy, but I understand.
I may be outside of my lane here, but just the way I'm currently thinking about it is there is this inextricable relationship at a very fundamental level between the observed and the observer. And, the way again, interpreting this through the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, you cannot simultaneously know the velocity and position of a particle at a certain resolution, right? There's a trade-off, I guess, between the example I saw recently of this was you could have a very high resolution photo of, say, a pool table, or you could have the same file size as a video, but the video would be much lower resolution, but it would give you a different form of information. I'm sure you
that's just a trade-off.
Yeah, so there's a trade-off.
But this is deeper. Okay.
In
other words, there are plenty of things where you're observing it causes it to be in some state that it wouldn't have been otherwise. One doesn't need to invoke Heisenberg and quantum theory in order to get that kind of a feel. It's very tempting to do it. And I'll be honest, physicists do it when there's nobody looking and then chastise everyone else for doing it. But the issue with position and momentum being in some sense in conflict, I don't know how to say it the best, but it says that there's a particularly beautiful set of simplistic states as long as you want to ask questions about position. And there's a different set of simplistic states if you want to ask questions about velocity. Mm-hmm. And those states are known not to be the same states. Now, if I could mumble words about eigenstates, it's not going to help your listeners. It's just that there are certain problems for which one set of objects behave simply, and there's a different set of questions where a different set of objects behave simply, and they can't be the same set.
Right. Okay. So I guess the general principle I'm attempting to extract is that the nature of the observation or the questions we ask or the frame of reference we place on an observation actually affects what we see in many ways. And so,
but can I give a classical version of this?
Yeah.
I have a theremin. My wife got me one for my birthday. And have you ever played with a theremin?
I have not.
Your hands move around in space and it changes the capacitance of the object. And you get those sort of sci-fi tones.
Okay.
All right. Now, if I want to inspect my theremin, moving towards it causes it to change its pitch.
Right.
There's no way of approaching my theremin that doesn't cause it to change its behavior. So I can't just look at my theremin and see what it's doing, because if I move close to it, it'll change the pitch of the object. Now, the reason I picked the theremin is that it's not a quantum system. It's a classical field theory called electromagnetism that causes that to happen. And you already see the effect. So I'm just saying that gauge theory is closer to classical electromagnetism than it is to quantum mechanics. And those two concepts collide in something called quantum field theory, which is, for example, what we were talking about with electrons and photons at the beginning.
Yeah, maybe I'm maybe using wrong terms here, because, like, again, the book I read most recently on this, on quantum in general, was The Dancing Wu-Li Masters. And the author of that is...
I'm going to hook you up.
Gary
Friends
Zukav.
don't let friends read The Dancing Wu-Li Masters. The
problem
is it's inspiring, but you're going to get a lot of mysticism that is probably best saved for later.
Understood. I do appreciate the mysticism at times. So
Hey, it's
I,
who
I'll
doesn't
say
love mysticism?
maybe
Just
to pull it out of that realm. I agree with what you're saying here. Describe the device you just described. It's also something like a thermostat, right? There's just a feedback loop that as the temperature in the room increases, it causes the air conditioner to kick on, which is in turn measuring the temperature. So there's a goal seeking or zeroing in behavior in certain devices.